Hey friends, and welcome to Roaming Taste Videos. This week we are making Tosca Cake or Swedish Tosca Cake. Simply put, this is a super buttery, almost sponge-like cake with this like caramelized sliced almond topping. It's super rustic, is perfect as like an afternoon snack cake or as like a slight treat that is a little bit different. And overall, I'd say probably the hardest part of making this is getting it out of the tin, but we've got some little tricks for that. I would love to know if you give this a go, so add a comment below, tag me on Instagram at Roaming Taste, subscribe for more videos like this, and if you do give it a go, please do follow the link in the caption below and leave a review and comment so more people can find this recipe.
These are the ingredients for the cake. We'll get to the topping later, but first we want to preheat our oven to 180 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you'll also want to grease-proof your cake tin. Ideally, you will use a springform here. That is absolutely best because of that caramelized topping, which we'll get to later. So we want to beat our butter, which should be room temperature, so it should be soft enough that when you push your finger into it, it still has a little bit of pushback, but so it's not like so soft that it's like melting, but it should be soft. And we want to whip our butter for 3 minutes on medium, so I'd say about the mark 2 or 3 if we are using a hand mixer, until it's like nice and light and fluffy. What we're doing here is we're just like really allowing as much air to get into that butter as possible, so that when we add in that sugar, it is really well aerated and there is a lot of tiny bubbles in that butter. I've done a lot of research as to why we cream our butter before we add in our sugar, and there doesn't seem to be anything on this. But the base of our Swedish, or Finnish actually, this is a very popular dish in Finland, of our cake is really light and buttery, and I think adding in as much air to our butter before adding in our sugar, which we're doing now, means that it's really nice and light. And that the butter has had some time to like really become so before we add in our sugar. We want to beat our butter and sugar for approximately 5 minutes. So by the time we finish beating, our mixture will be super pale and it will still have a tinge of yellow to it. We do not want it to be white, so if it is going more on the white side, we should absolutely stop beating. I always recommend beating at like medium, so 2 to 3 mark if we're using a hand mixer, or an electric mixer is always the best option. Beating it for this long does 2 things effectively. One, it means it is evenly dispersing that sugar throughout the butter, which helps it dissolve better into that butter. It also increases the volume in our batter, which will give us this like beautiful light crumb in our cake, which is what we always want. We always want a nice light crumb in our cake. The origins of this cake are not very clearly known, despite doing a decent amount of research, and it seems SwedishFood.com is the only place where they give any kind of like background information, but it looks like Puccini's opera Tosca, which premiered in Rome in 1900 and was based on a French play from 1887, is what gave this cake inspiration. I'm not really sure how, I'm not sure why, but it seems that the first advertisements for this cake were in 1934. Now we're adding our egg. We're adding in 1 egg at a time to our cake. So this helps us incorporate those eggs nice and lightly. We've added so much air to our butter and sugar, and that sugar should be dissolved, and eggs are really high in fat, aren't they? So we don't want to add all 4 eggs at a time, which would just like overwhelm that nice light butter mixture. We want to incorporate those for probably about like 40 to 50 seconds each. I would just like speed this entire process up because there's a lot more beating here. So we want to add in 1 egg at a time, combine, add in the next egg, combine, add in the next egg. And I have preached about this before, but never ever add a egg to your batter direct, because if it is at all bad, it will ruin all that work, especially if you've beaten for so long and then you have a bad egg. So always crack your egg into a separate bowl and then add it to your batter. Once we have incorporated all our eggs, the butter will look like, I think the best description is probably like slightly curdled, because you will see that it is really light. There's a lot more liquid effectively. Thanks to those eggs, it will be a lot lighter of a batter. And once we can put those beaters away, because now we get to sieving our dry ingredients and we just need to fold those in. I discovered here when I was sieving my ground almonds that some of my almonds actually weren't super fine. So sieving turned out to be a lifesaver for the cake, but really took a long time. So I almost recommend we don't want to take too long in sieving our dry ingredients, because all that air that we've incorporated will then start to deflate as it just like has this weight of dry ingredients sitting on top of it. It took me probably like almost 10 minutes to sieve the ground almonds, but what I discovered is by pushing them or moving them around my sieve, that it actually did like make those almonds more fine, and I finally got all of them in there. It did just take a little while, and then we want to fold in those dry ingredients. I always find when I'm folding in dry ingredients to a batter or a really nice like light mixture, that there will always be pockets of wet in just like hidden within the batter somewhere. So I always recommend folding from the base, but then also like pressing into the middle, as you'll see me do here. Or I'm just like weaving across the middle of my batter, which I'm not doing too fast. You always want to work like quite slow but methodical. I always use that word. Methodical is just such a great word for when you're folding, because you don't want any dry patches to remain in your bowl, and usually it's not at the bottom of your bowl, it's like in the middle of your batter. So once we have our nice smooth batter, we are ready to bake. We want to place that in our cake tin and smooth out, but again, we don't want to like spend too long here or work with it too much, because we want our cake to be super duper light. We really just want to make sure that we push it into the edges of that cake tin and smooth it out as much as possible, because it will rise slightly in the center through baking. So when we want to place it in the oven and bake it for 50 minutes until a skewer comes out clean and it is really nice and golden on top, as you see here. So you don't want to let it get too brown, so I recommend checking if it is like this level, just taking it out of the oven and checking with a skewer at like the 45-minute mark. Now we get to making our topping, and those are the ingredients we need. We also need a saucepan here. So place the butter, the milk, the salt, the sugar, and those all too important sliced almonds into your saucepan on medium heat. What we want is that our sugar dissolves, our butter melts, and what really happens is that a like syrup forms, and our almonds begin to caramelize and are coated in like this beautiful syrup. We also don't want there to be too much liquid left in our saucepan. And so you'll kind of see that once you remove it from the heat. You'll want to cook this for about 5 minutes, but if there is still a lot of syrup in the base of our saucepan, I recommend just returning it to the heat. What we really want is that there is a little bit of syrup remaining, so I would say like a good 1/4 cup, but any more, and that will then just go around our cake as we put those almonds on top of the cake. Now we are ready to put this on top. It's just like so good. And there was a slight technical glitch when I was like smoothing those almonds out on the cake, so we want to just put them all on there, and then really just, I think, an offset spatula or the back of a spoon to really smooth out those almonds on the top of our cake. And then we want to return it to the oven and bake it for 10 minutes until it's really, really golden. And then we want to let it cool for, I'd say, a good 10 to 15 minutes. Follow your gut here. You don't want it to be so hot that when you touch the tin, you feel like you're getting burnt, but you don't want it to be so cold that you could just like pick it up easily. We want to use a skewer or something to help us like loosen those caramelized almonds from the tin. And as we remove that tin, you'll see I have loosened it and then I've put it back on. You can see areas where those almonds, like an entire section, might look like it's just going to come loose if we remove that tin. So we want to go back over any sections with our skewer, and then once we've done that, we want to lightly remove our springform again and get any areas that are just kind of like a little bit loose and press them with our skewer. And you'll see that there are like almonds stuck to the edge of our tin. That is quite common, and that some might fall off. And this is why we want to work on our cake while it is still really warm, because any of those sections, that any like little pieces of almond that come off, we can like press them into that cake. And as the cake cools, those almonds will stick because it's still like sticky and warm. But here we go, we've got our finished cake. No one will know the dramas we had with getting it out of the tin, and now you can enjoy it. I really hope you do.